Hey everybody, welcome to She's Smart. I'm your host, Maria Robotham. On today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome Chadaé Bowler, a powerhouse in marketing with 18 years of experience growing global brands in the music and entertainment world, including roles at Universal Music Group, RX, and Sony Music. Chadaé's story goes so much deeper than her impressive resume, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So get cozy as we connect, learn, and laugh together on She's Smart. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to be here.
All right, so your story,
yes,
who you are now, starts from when you were little.
Yes.
You had a very big experience when you were little. You grew up in Brooklyn.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about growing up in Brooklyn and then this transition to being in Darien, because that is a massive jump for you.
Yes. So my story really starts with the fact that I'm first generation American born here. My grandparents and my parents, they've immigrated from Jamaica, West Indies. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York to my Caribbean parents, and I was the first kid. So I grew up with a lot of adult influences around me, and like my grandparents really set out to create this wonderful life in America. They believed in the American dream, and so they really set their own children up for success, and a lot of that was through education, because while I wouldn't say we were poor, we were definitely, not affluent by any means, but I think from our experiences and their life experiences and their worldview, they really came to America with the idea that like their children were going to have a better life than them. I mentioned education was a big thing, so that was going to be the key to life, right? Mm-hmm. Because we didn't grow up with a lot of, it wasn't like I was going to get passed down like a trust fund or anything like that. So they taught me the value of hard work and education, and that was going to be the key to unlocking whatever I wanted in life. And so when I was growing up, I was always in like these, what we called back then, gifted programs.
Oh yes, the gifted and
talented programs.
Yes, when I was a kid.
I saw, mine was like Astral and Arista. And I remember just being really young and in Brooklyn and going to public school. We still were very competitive. So the schools, actually, I went to a great public school growing up. I think that one of the most impactful people in my life was my 4th and 5th grade teachers, Miss Boyk and Miss Bogle. They were wonderful. They were these two really strong Black women. So like growing up and having authority figures who looked like me was like very impactful. Mm-hmm. And they were the ones that helped me realize a dream of, I don't really remember the exact moment, but I knew from a young age, and I want to say around 3rd or 4th grade, I knew that I wanted to go to a boarding school setting. I didn't know what that meant, what it was like, and I think it may have come from a television show that I watched back then. I have no idea.
Something seemed very cool about boarding school.
Yeah, it just seemed cool because, like, my parents had immigrated. It's not like we had this, like, route that we had to stay where we were. So I was just like, oh, okay, I'm a wanderer. I'm a dreamer. So this is, a cool way to do it. And I had no idea how I was going to get there, but it was my 4th and 5th grade teachers who continued to encourage me and saw that, like, I had this innate desire to keep learning. I was just like incessant student. Like I always asked why. I wanted to know more. That I always wanted like a deeper meaning to things and not just from memory, except for math. Like math was the one thing that I was like, I definitely need to just like figure out my timetables, and that was it. Yeah. But like the theory behind things or how we got to where we are. And I guess also being a first generation American, I started to ask questions about why is this like this? Why are we all like in certain groups or however it was?
Why are we all placed in these areas?
Yes, exactly. I ended up in Darien because in 6th and 7th grade, there were these programs or scholarship programs. One was called Prep for Prep and one was A Better Chance. And I knew of these because my teachers would say to me, if you keep your grades up, there are opportunities where you can go to day schools, or you could, if you're really interested in boarding school, this is what it entails. So because I had this curiosity and people around me who were willing to feed that curiosity, they also helped provide these opportunities for me, or at least like avenues that I could explore and discuss with my family.
Yeah, the Better Chance program, I read it. Yeah. I read about it when you sent it to me. I didn't know that it existed. It's a fantastic program. It's been around for over 60 years.
60 years.
And it helps students of color go into, higher achieving schools, right?
Yes.
High schools, boarding schools, like you said.
Yep.
And there's an application process for it?
Absolutely. So similar to Prep for Prep, you have to take a test. You have to show your aptitude and that you can handle it. There's a lot beyond the academics. There's also a level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Of your...
can you emotionally take it?
Yeah, emotionally, and then also socially, right? Yeah. Because what happens is unfortunately, is that a lot of these schools, they're
all white.
They're all white.
Like,
they're
let's just say
predominantly
they're
white.
predominantly white. I mean, we live in a
environment,
predominantly white area.
Yes,
yeah.
Homogenous. They're, and also like especially for the boarding schools, it's not just lower income kids as they're called that would be accepted into these schools. You are now put into a pool of high academic achieving students, whether it's sports, whether it's the social aspect, or some students get in just because their parents want to send them away for and they have the means to do so. So for that, I had a really pivotal moment in my life. When I was in 7th grade, my mom had passed, and she had passed away from a diabetic coma. She and my dad had been married, but they had divorced shortly before she passed because their marriage didn't last, but they remained friends. So I saw my mom very often. But she also, I think at the time, and this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, when she had my brother and me, I think there was undetected postpartum depression that was not actually named at the time. Like she was showing symptoms of it, and clearly there were some issues, but find that they didn't really study that back then. And so it is a tragic thing for a family to experience, but at the same time, again, this emotional, or having been around adults my entire life, I think I adapted this idea that she wasn't suffering anymore. So I had this understanding that, for a 12-year-old child, like it's still it's a lot to carry. And
7th grade, it's a tough year in general.
Absolutely. And so But I think just from my upbringing, I had such a strong foundation around me between my family that, and again, the village that I had, they still helped me push along. And so everything that I did from then on, I knew I couldn't do it in vain, right? Like I had to be very intentional, and always knew that like I had an angel with me. So that's where my spirituality comes from. And
did she come back? Did she come back as a being, a spirit, a tangible object? For instance, my aunt who passed away when I was younger, she's a butterfly. Yeah. She floats around every once in a while. Yeah. Someone's going to come back as a praying mantis. Yeah. I don't know who it is, but he keeps showing up at my door. Yeah. So does she come back as something that you see?
So, that's really funny, because I remember shortly after she passed, people would ask me if I've ever dreamt of my mom. And I actually think it took years before I did so. And I remember the dream that I had where we were in my grandparents' house, and she was like guiding me into a room. I could hear her voice, and I know the moment that I saw her turn around, that's when I woke up. And that was actually, I would say, 6 years after she passed, actually. And I think that's really the only time I've ever really dreamt of my mom or seen her, but I feel her all the time. So I think she's actually more of this, she's this being that I have with me. I don't think it's a tangible object
omnipresent
yet. She's omnipresent. And so my grandmother, though, when she passed, so my dad's mother, my grandmother, when she passed, she was the one that I actually see physically, and it's a black butterfly, actually, which is interesting.
That's
and
magic,
so I love that
though.
question, by the way. That was really great, because I do think about symbolism, and I've been into I'm very deep in my spirituality. I do believe in astrology. I think I'm a Cancer through and through with a little bit of Leo energy. And so I do manifest on these like positive affirmations, or like, why is something happening? Again, just wanting to find deeper meaning. I definitely believe that we've all been here before, and that, everything happens for a reason and all of it. And so I do find meaning, and I try to subscribe that to things. But to answer your question, the one thing that happened physically, or who I see physically, is my grandmother.
Is your grandmother?
Yeah.
That's really special. Yeah. You literally left this program. You got into Darien High School.
Yes.
And for those of us my friends and family on the West Coast, Darien is right next to us in Weston, right outside of next to Westport, outside of New York City. And it's a wonderful school district.
And I didn't know anything about Darien. And the reason why we chose it was because while I was looking at traditional boarding schools like the Choates, the Deerfields of the world, one, I did have this really huge thing happen in my life. And I felt like I still needed to be a little bit closer to home. Yeah. This is all happening in 7th grade. I'm 12 years old. And Darien offered me a great opportunity. And I will say the people who were leading the program in the Darien community, I just saw the passion and how much this meant to the community itself. I felt safe there. It felt like a family setting. I actually relate it to the facts of life. So there were 6 of us, 6 young women who were from the tri-state area. We actually had one student who was from Ohio, so she was the farthest that flew in. And we all lived together in the house for 4 years, but we would go home on weekends, and we would go home for the summers. But we also had families who lived and with children who were raised in Darien, and we went to school with them. But we had host families that we would visit on the weekends, and they helped us acclimate. It was a really awesome setting. Wow. And so I don't know what the experience would have been like if I did a traditional boarding school. I know it's very different, and I actually have friends that to this day, who have remained my closest friends because we all went through something very similar. What I also got out of this experience was a whole community and like different friends. And, actually I married a guy that I met in high school, and we now live in Weston, which is interesting. I never really thought that would be my life.
I thought you moved to Weston.
Yeah, I never thought I'd move to Weston. But, I'm so grateful for that experience. And like one thing that it taught me was that I can't take anything for granted, right? And so actually the thing that helped me connect with people was the universal language of music, right? Yeah. So at the time that we were in high school, like I think we finally got broadband, and then the Napsters of the world and the LimeWires and social media, and like all these little things were popping up that helped us connect with people. So even though we were different and like it wasn't super diverse, we still found ways to connect just from, the human to human connection. Yeah. And
that's how music is. It connects everyone. So you had music growing up. Yes. It was in your house all the time. Yes. What was your first album? Do you remember? Was it a record or was it like a CD? What did you have?
So it's a multi-part question, or a multi-part answer actually, because the first album, the first musical influences that I remember, one of them is actually part of my name. So while my name is spelled differently, it's pronounced the same way as Chadaé, the band/singer. And because my last name, my maiden name is Chinese, it's Chang. My dad liked the phonetics of having the CHA in both my first name and my last name, so Chadaé Chang. But so Chadaé was the first album, and I remember everyone just saying it to me because, they would hear my name and people would always sing the lyrics.
I get it.
But then also Tracy Chapman. So to this day, she is my all-time favorite artist. My biological mother's brother, Gregory, he was one of my biggest first musical influences, who shared all of his music with me. And so Chadaé and Tracy Chapman were always playing. And so I just, again, there were messages in the stories, in their music was just something that has stayed with me to this day.
Did you cry when Tracy Chapman performed at, was it the Grammys?
Yeah. Did I cry? Her song became number one after, 38 years since its release. So she was the first Black woman singer, songwriter to have a number one song where she is the only person billed on the country music charts. When the curtains rose, I was like, it'd be really awesome. And then I saw her there, and it just clicked, and I lost it, and that was it for me for the rest of the night. But
that was one of the greatest moments.
One of the greatest moments, and what a story she has. And that's the power of music, right? Is the storytelling, and like stories of enslaved people in the U.S. and how they carry those messages. And like I think the culture that has built up around those stories and the beats that they come to, it's the storytelling that has passed from generation to generation, and it has morphed, but it still stays within the families. And so I think it's a beautiful thing, and music is really impactful that way.
It's so impactful. There was Mel Robbins did an entire episode on music and how it affects you. In this podcast, she said, go back to when you're in high school and like think of a song that you listened to that just made you happy, like something that brought you joy, made you feel good. And when I went through this process, I was like, oh wait, I really love The Cure. And I hadn't listened to The Cure in I don't know how long. And then I turned it on, and it was Friday I'm in Love, and it became my song of summer this year. The kids love it. It's one of Easton's favorite songs now. And there's something about it that takes you back to a time when there was that freedom, when you're kind of figuring out who you are and you're growing up, and it's the happiness that it imbibes, right? And then all these other songs came up, like Mighty Mighty Bosstones, like the craziest bands. Enya. I used to listen to Enya before my swim meets. Who does that? I don't know, but I did. Listen to Enya.
But like it's the way that it connects. I really do think that it unlocks core memories. So like you're saying, the music that we listened to in high school, I think I attached them more to the memories. So like, I mentioned, I met Simon, my husband, in high school. And one of the things, like actually before he proposed to me, we were driving to Rhode Island, and he starts putting on this music, or a playlist that we made in high school. And I was like, I didn't think anything of it. It had also been my birthday. So I was just like, oh, maybe it's like a nostalgia thing or whatever. But it definitely brought me back to that moment of high school. So like, while like I had no expectation of a proposal, it meant even more because we had that story to go back to, right?
So music has always been part of your life. So that's what brought you into the music industry.
Yes. And it's sort of a non-linear path of getting here or there. But I had went through all 4 years of high school in this very competitive program. You know, the schools that I was applying to and the majors that I were applying to were more along the lines of the arts. So I did theater when I was in high school. So I thought like, oh, maybe I'd go to college and do a theater program. But then I started to get this like stage fright, which is so weird because I'd come up, you know, singing in the church or doing theater or plays, and I would get terrified. Like I remember I had a lead in 8th grade, and right before the curtains came up, I almost had a panic attack, but I still went through with the play and everything. I used to have to
run to the bathroom.
Yeah.
The minute before I'd have to go on stage to perform, I would run to the bathroom.
Right? Like,
and then have to run back on. But those nerves,
it helped,
but
right?
Totally helped. Like I was ready to go after that,
so it becomes like a ritual, but like the nerves don't go away. Like you still have the nerves, but I had to do that or like release this, like whether it's through tears or like you're saying, going to the bathroom or do whatever you have to do. Like, but it's this release of the fear so that you can actually fill it with the courage to go on stage and do the things that you need to do, right? And I love when I'm able to accomplish it and look back and say, oh my God, we did that. Or I felt the most alive when I was on stage.
Absolutely.
But I think somewhere along the way, especially moving away to high school, I started to develop this fear of awareness. So it's like this burden of awareness of being different that even having the spotlight on me started to get into my head. So I decided to switch my major then to science because I loved biology and the questioning. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I just knew that I liked whether it was psychology or genes or like I knew that I wanted to do something in the science realm. And so I started applying to schools for that. I matriculated to the University of Maryland as a biology major, and I went through with it for 2.5 years and was like, something's missing, you know? And I also think that, again, I had moved out of my house essentially 1 year after my mom had passed and was so preoccupied with like, you know, doing the right thing for her and her name that by the time I got to college, right, actually I'm really on my own now because even though I had went away to school and lived in a housing setting where I wasn't with my parents, going to college was a very different experience for me. While I was ready academically, I wasn't ready, I think, for I don't think I was ready to be on my own. And I know most of us aren't, but I just felt like it caught up to me.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of things that I started questioning. And like, I think around my junior year of college. And I was like, am I in the right place? Am I doing all of this for myself? Like I knew that education was going to get me somewhere, but I was like, I don't think I want to be a doctor. I don't think I want to be in a lab all day. I love people. I love the arts. Is there a space for me there? And like I mentioned, like music was changing at that time because of the way that technology was changing, the way that we consumed it. And I was in the library studying for a test, and I remember hearing for the first time Fall Out Boy, Where Sugar We're Going Down, and the way the beat comes in, and I was just like, that is like, I want to listen to that again and again, and I want all of my friends to listen to it. And so I was like, how do I do that? Like, what is it that, you know, how do people, is there a career in music? Someone has to put the music out. I don't know how they do it, but I started to realize that I needed to know what marketing was. Like I made the connection that whatever I needed to do in life was either, like I needed to develop these skills that I could essentially take anywhere. And so I switched my major to communications, and I did that at Maryland first, but I was like, I knew that internships were coming up, and I needed to be in the place where I could have those opportunities. And I was also going through, you know, this inner turmoil of, am I in the right place? And I felt like I needed to just come home. So that was the theme for me, was coming home to music, coming home to my parents, coming home to New York. And so I took some time off and I came back to New York. And at that time, like back in the early aughts, like we had Craigslist and we had like websites. I know we didn't have a LinkedIn. It wasn't like, you know, you didn't have connections like you did. I mean, I'm sure people still had connections, but for me, I had to do a lot of research. And so I started looking at labels. Like I went on websites and I was like, what do people have internships or their jobs or like what's going on? And I remember applying to each of the majors, so like the Universals of the world, like, you know, Sony and Warner. So I started looking at their frontline labels and I was like, oh, I wonder if there's opportunities for me to get internships there. And like I sent a bunch of cold emails and, talked about like why I was passionate about it, like where I was in my life. And I got calls from 2 out of the 3 of them and went in and interviewed. And again, like I knew that I was going to transfer to a school. I just didn't know when or where. And that helped encourage me to figure out what it was I wanted to do. So finding my passion and what I thought I wanted to do in my career helped me. And again, I had gone through the college experience, but I was like, I need to be intentional about what it is that I really want to do and what I'm passionate about. Yep. And so that helps me steer my major to, again, marketing. So I enrolled at the Fashion Institute of Technology, was not a design major. I cannot sew for my life. But they had a wonderful program on the business side. So it was also 2 stops away from my internship. So it just kind of worked out. But there it was wonderful. Like I got a role in A&R. So that was an opportunity for me to understand how bands are signed. I was a music scout, so I went and saw bands, live bands all the time. I was looking up new and like unsigned bands or on MySpace, like the time. So again, like the technology and what was available to me, I was being very resourceful and finding new opportunities. And what drew me to music and working in it was being able to help these artists get their art out into the world. So it meant so much to me because music had a way of putting feeling or words or a melody to the unspoken things of how we felt. And I wanted to honor the people who had the courage to share that art with us, their magic, and get it out to, again, as many people as possible.
Is there anyone that you met that like you loved and went on?
So I didn't have the pleasure of signing anyone to the major at the time, but I worked with so many artists and like I would scout folks. And one of them actually, which is so funny, is a band called the Ting Tings.
No,
and
the Ting Tings.
Okay. So the Ting Tings, like I was looking on MySpace and when you had like your top 8 and you could MySpace taught us all how to code. Like it taught you micro communities, like all these wonderful things. And I think one of my friends actually, through my time scouting had put this song on their top 8 and I never heard of it before. And I was like, I need to learn more about this band. And I reached out, like I found their MySpace page and reached out to their manager and we started to have conversations, but all of the majors at that time were looking at them, or like all of the like indie bands. But so, I just kind of escalated things to my lead A&R and he would go and see them and take meetings and whatnot. But it was really cool to be a part of that and make introductions. And it was so funny because this is like 18 years ago that I heard the That's Not My Name song for the first time. And I think it came back on TikTok like 2 years ago. I remember hearing it. It was
there
so
was
funny.
some sort of meme.
Some meme or like,
That's Not My Name.
Or like, it was a meme or a challenge or something where all the celebrities were like, that's not my name from all the characters that they played. And I was like, oh my God, it's the Ting Tings.
Wait, I remember that meme.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you love this part about being with the actual artist.
Yes.
When nowadays, so I just read that Justin Bieber signed a huge deal with Spotify where he's making I have the numbers here. He's making $3 million a month for the next 20 years. Back in the day, artists used radio to get their music out. And their radio is radio still, I have a couple questions. Is radio still relevant for artists? Do they still need it? How else are they getting their music out and how are they making money from it? Because I don't know, I think it's like a penny every time or half a penny every time they play on Spotify or something like that.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question. Or all the questions are interesting and they're questions that I've had because while I started my career in music, there was a point where I took a break from it and went in and used my marketing degree to actually make music, make money in music on the professional side. And I would say about really at the height of COVID. So like when COVID came, artists were in this place of, while social media was there and it was helping them get their music out and like people were doing things with it, it didn't look like it does today, right? You were still using the Spotify's or any of the DSPs on the consumer end to listen to music. YouTube is huge. It's actually the biggest streaming platform. Music is the biggest music discovery platform. Spotify is the first to really help to understand the monetization piece of it. And in 2020, I really started to ask those questions myself. How are artists making money?
Yeah.
And most of the time it was through the live experience. It's like actually through, going on tours, and only a select, like maybe the top 1% of recording artists are actually making a lucrative amount or livable wage from their art. And so in 2020, when no one could tour, everyone had to turn to digital. Everyone had to make sure that they had a presence on social media, that they were understanding where their music was going, how they were making money just from being able to stream. And then only, again, based on once, we were able to be in person again, only a select few artists were able to go out and actually make music from touring or even get touring. So the effects of COVID have done two things. One, it's helped the top echelon of artists make even more money because they are now able to understand their distribution channels a little bit more.
Okay.
And then also with the touring aspect, there's just more money that's coming in because they're able to draw in a crowd. But it's also allowed an undercurrent of, we call them middle class or emerging artists that can come up, because now music has become democratized from distribution, is what we call it. So distribution is the ability for anyone who makes music and owns the rights to those music to upload them into a person or an entity that will deliver them to all of the digital storefronts. And so there's I would say there's anywhere between, I know of, the last time I did the numbers, there's over 280 digital distributors that
really.
Yeah. And so digital streaming platforms, my bad.
Okay.
And then the distribution will take that music and make sure that it goes to all of those DSPs. So whomever, if I have some obscure app that I want to listen to music on, the distributor makes sure that it's licensed so that the listener can hear it. Okay.
And who pays the licensing? They pay
so that's
for the
from
licensing
advertising. Fee. There's deals that are made with the labels, so the rights owners who are saying to the distributor, hey, if you can get it on these platforms and through their ad dollars, we get a portion of the amount of streams. It's very complicated.
It's so complicated.
I will say this, because you might have to edit that part out. The music industry, especially in the digital landscape, is so complicated, and that is a big problem today.
Yeah.
So while it has democratized and it has allowed, you and I could record a song now and upload it to a digital distributor who can get it on a Spotify or an Apple Music or Tidal or whatever, because they have the licensing agreements and all of those things. They're helping me get my music out there, but we're not making actual money from it, because unless we have a big enough audience to pull a significant portion of the streams, you're really making 0.003 cents per stream. So is it even money? You actually, the equipment that you have in this room costs more than it would for 1,000 streams that you would get on that song. So
that's it's so discouraging.
It's discouraging, but there's opportunities now, and I think there's a lot more people who are asking these questions and saying, well, how can I be a better advocate for the artist? How can we honor the art and make sure that people are getting compensated for their art? So there's now technologies that are popping up in distributors who are saying, you know what, you can go direct to consumer. You don't need these complicated label deals like we used to have back in the day. So there's now opportunities where an artist can have direct deals with someone and say, I will license my music to you. I get to keep my masters because I created this art with my own money, with my own connections and all of that. They can own their likeness, the rights to their music, and license that out to whether it's a major label or a direct distribution deal or giving it directly to their fans. They can control so much more of the value chain in creation of music. Whereas prior to COVID, and for the longest time, and some labels operate in the same model of wanting to own the creative aspect. They want to own the access to the audiences. They want to own your name, image, and likeness if you're an artist. So you were giving up so much of your creativity when back in the day in these traditional models, that today you have the access to go out there and own more of that, say. You have more to leverage today as an artist. I do think that people get so caught up in the dream of it all and the wanting to flex or whatever, on the gram or whatever it is, that they think that, oh, I'm going to go big, but it's so as quickly as your star can rise, it can be taken away.
Absolutely.
And again, you're kind of you're not technically a work for hire, but I think it's a glamorized position because as an artist, you are renting an audience from someone. If you don't own your relationship to your fans and your audience and how you're getting your music to them or selling merch, and you have all these entities that are taking pieces of it, and you're not able, again, it gets very complicated, and there's like someone handling your merch, and there's a deal for your touring, and there's a deal for your recorded music, and then if you decide to go into TV, film, there's like a whole other spew of it. Like, you have so many different people taking parts of your pie, so it's really important to have a trusted advisor, and of course, like, having someone that can handle your finances, because a lot of times too, artists don't realize that there are taxes that they have to pay on things, or compliance, or all of these things. So the financials of it, while like we're dealing with multi-million-dollar deals sometimes, like, that money has to be dished out to a lot of people, and the artist is the last one to get paid.
You love this.
Yeah,
like, you love this. What is this next for you?
For me, I have for the longest time been like, I want to do this for the artist. Then I learned in order for an artist to become viable for a business, I need to understand what the business needs. And then also how does it affect the consumer? Like, how is the consumer listening? And what happens a lot of the time is that the business and the technology come together because they're the first ones to say, like, we are going to this is how people are listening. We can monetize off of this, and we can find the artists that are coming in. So that's how it's always worked. And I really do want to find a way to bridge the gap. Watching the Grammys growing up, artists would get on stage and they would thank their managers or they thank their team. And I was like, I want to be part of the team. I want to be in the background. And so for me, I'm still trying to figure out, how do I find the right people? And so I'm pretty stealthy. I'm currently consulting for a couple of companies that want to touch the entertainment business. One of them happens to be a CPA firm that's looking to grow their business management arm. Okay. So the business managers are the CPAs, or the folks that help artists or entertainers manage their money. Yeah. I myself don't know anything about that side of the business, so it's an opportunity for me to learn and do and advocate for artists while working for a company that can pay me. I've always tried to not take money from the artists unless like we have a very clear agreement, and that's why management doesn't work for me, because they already make so little money that in order to keep driving these opportunities, it's better for me to work on the brand side and get paid from a major corporation and help extend that opportunity to an artist, but not take away from their pot.
So let's go back to these amazing older musical stars, the Stevie Wonders. Who coming up has that? Because I listen to music every day. It's on from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to bed. The kids listen to everything. Ben has taught me a lot about reggae. I never used to listen to reggae. In fact, really didn't like reggae. I think more I didn't like reggae because you should be. Because it came in, there was an undertone of pot, and I don't know. There was, as I was growing up, I was always very offended by pot for some reason. Yeah. That's a little deeper dive on myself, but I never listened to that music. I listened to, when everyone else was listening to the Backstreet Boys, I listened to Garth Brooks and Harry Connick Jr. Like, those were my album. I had all of their CDs. And I think about that kind of music and how it stood the test of time. Right. I mean, Harry Connick Jr.'s, I listened to his album every Christmas and still listen to Garth Brooks. Like, Friends in Low Places will be iconic for the test to stand the test of time. Who is that now? Because I don't see it. I mean, Taylor Swift is just an entity of her own. She's just a behemoth in the industry, as she is. Right. Beyonce, obviously. How she has changed and evolved and done for the music industry is pretty phenomenal. Right. Who else?
There's that saying that artists are a reflection of the times. Like, art is a reflection of the times, and the artists that will stand the test of time make music that we will go back to. So I think what the kids are listening to today in high school, for them in 20 years when they look back, the ones that'll stand the test of time are probably going to be the Billie Eilish's. I think Chappell Roan, and I know that her rise, like what we've seen, especially for the last year since her album came out, because it came out a year ago, so she's in this Grammy cycle, is fascinating, right? But she's been grinding for 10 years prior to that, right? Okay. So I think and she has a major team behind, like a major label deal, but her team behind her, and I think she came with some leverage and, being able to say, this is who I am, and her fans are the ones that are going to keep her moving forward. I think gone are the days of the media telling us who's going to be popular, and it's the reason why you're saying, like, even a Harry Connick Jr., while he is someone that has become I call him kind of a niche artist, and he has very dedicated fans because he's cultivated those relationships.
Yes.
But he wasn't like a major label. No one was really pushing him on us. He also has a niche where we know him for, like, I think of him around the holidays as well. Other artists today that are doing a Sabrina Carpenter is another one who kind of came. She's been, and I'm talking about all the pop girlies right now, which is, I think of Victoria Monet is going to stand the test of time, especially as like in the R&B space. For hip hop, I'm a huge fan of Tyler, the Creator. And I think anyone that pushes the envelope owns their creative runway and says, like, this is who I am, come with me or don't. Like, that's it. And they have the channels now to own that. And it's funny because I collect vinyl. So I have I'm not like a crazy collector, and I'm not a crate digger who's going to go through and I'm not a producer. And when I was working for Q-Tip as an assistant, one of my responsibilities was organizing his record collection, and he has like 20,000 records. So while some of it was already organized, like I would go through the things that he was working through, or if he wanted like a certain sound. So I was able to intimately see these things. And he has the most obscure things. And imagine 20,000 records from people that, like, some of them we know very well. So he has all the classics, but there's a ton of people who in the 70s, 60s, or whatever were getting things on wax, and we may not have heard of these artists, but their music will live on because it's been immortalized in this physical product. That's how I feel about vinyl.
So what was your first vinyl record? Do you remember?
My first vinyl record was gifted to me. So it was Infinity on High by Fall Out Boy, and this was back in 2008, I believe. So again, Spotify didn't exist, and I was in advance from the label because I was working at Island at the time, which is where they were signed. And then the first one that I bought was Bob Marley and the Wailers. So, but now, and I don't remember when exactly that was, but I've also been gifted like vinyl from my family. Ugh. I do remember the first CD I bought because it was the double Smashing Pumpkins.
Yes. I saw them in concert.
Oh my gosh. Recently, or like?
No, this was back in my junior year of high school.
Yeah. Nice.
I went to their concert. My high school boyfriend was a huge fan.
Yeah.
So we went.
Yeah.
And I fell asleep during the concert.
Oh my God.
I had just played a weekend water polo tournament.
Okay.
I was exhausted.
You're tired. Yes.
And I went, and I can fall asleep very easily with really loud sounds. I was known as a child for falling asleep under tables.
Okay.
Because when I get tired, I would just fall asleep somewhere.
To.
Grayson's very much like that.
So you just got it done.
But I did listen to Smashing Pumpkins. My first record that I remember listening to, because my parents had the giant wooden speakers with the record player in the middle.
Yep.
We used to turn on Michael Jackson's Bad in our little living room, and my sister and I would dance to every single song that we could over and over and over again. Just put it back on and put it back on. My kids don't know what vinyl is, and now I'm offending myself that they don't know about it. Like, I feel like we need to get back into that so we know how to do it.
I think just getting back into it, and there's like something intimate about playing a vinyl record, right? The idea that like you can only hear 4 songs at a time before you have to go over and flip it. And it's very intentional, right? It's not that passive listening that streaming has given us, which I don't mind it. It's beneficial for artists to have that passive listening. But I do think that my preference, especially, like, I still, like, again, it's the way that I grew up, and I want my kids, they probably don't even realize it, right? And I didn't realize it growing up that was the routine or the ritual, but so maybe it's a little bit nostalgia for me, but I love putting on a record and the kids coming out and like looking at the artwork and reading the liner notes, and I still believe in that. And I feel like if the artist is taking the time to create it, and if there's all these buzzwords about super fandom and all these things. And I think the companies are taking that to mean like, oh, they're spending a ton of money and they're very active on social. But sometimes the super fan really wants that intimate relationship with the artist, and they don't, and the labels have nothing to do with that. And so those moments where I get to kind of be analog and say like, I'm proud of my collection. I'm proud when people come over and they see like, the music that I listen to, and that my kids have this well-rounded view of like music beyond.
All right. So at the end, I ask everyone the same 3 questions. Yes. What is something you've changed your mind about recently?
It's my relationship with work. I always thought that, again, growing up, you're going to do your 9 to 5, you're going to get your 401k, you're going to do X, Y, Z. It's going to be a very linear thing. And I've changed my mind with that idea. I And I realized that to be successful and to not feel stressed, I have to be a whole person, and that I have to communicate my needs more. I have to be intentional about going after the things that I think I deserve. I also am at a point in my life where work isn't the only thing that I have, right? So I have to make space for all of it.
Creating space is a big one. Towards the beginning of the year, no, that's too far away. This summer, as I was kind of reflecting on Style by Riso and starting this podcast and all the other things that I do, the volunteering, I needed to create space.
Right.
So there was an intention
Right.
of creating space from like the summertime.
Right.
And it's amazing what it's opened.
Yep.
But when you allow the space, because you want to bring in the other things
Absolutely.
that fulfill you, that make you who you are, that you want to give time to. It's very easy as we're younger to give our time to whatever,
Right.
like immediately.
Right.
Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that.
Yeah.
And then you just find that your pieces are everywhere.
Right.
And there's no space for anything else.
And that was going to be one of my questions to you, is how do you manage it all, right? Because
Not
you're, and that's something for me that I've also been trying, no is a complete sentence. And sometimes I feel so guilty for having to say no or not being able to be there. But it's like you said, I have so many, it's like Horcruxes everywhere.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my God,
the Horcrux.
right? And I'm like, I need it. I'm a Harry Potter nerd too. So I'm like, I need a time turner to like do all these things. But you also like, you're a mom. And so, part of those Horcruxes are in other people who demand more of my time, but also I want to give that time to. And I am not in the youth of saying yes to everything, because I have a responsibility to think about the people that depend on me the most.
Absolutely. Okay. The other question is, what's the most random thing on your bucket list?
I would say, oh my gosh. Okay, so it's two things, because just in case one of them doesn't come to fruition. But the first random thing that I really want to work on on my bucket list, is creating a capsule wardrobe. Yeah. I would love to completely just get rid of everything, like purge my closet and start with like just a few, I would say 30 statement pieces that I have. And that's
30 is a good number.
Right. I think
don't go below that. Just as a professional.
Yeah, I know. And I thought you would appreciate
30
that
is
one.
good.
So I'll be enlisting your services.
Of course. You can start adding in quality pieces too.
Exactly.
That you can wear with anything that cross over.
Yes. So I've actually been renting a lot recently, because I'm like, I don't want to purchase anything else, because the things that I purchase I want them to stand the test of time, be timeless and classic and whatnot. And then I would say the other random bucket list item, it's also something I kind of have been changing my mind on, but I've had so many random people come up to me and tell me that they can't wait to read my book. And I've always been like, what the hell am I going to write a book on, right? And I don't think I'm ready yet, but I've been taking notes and journaling and understanding like what I have, like what can I share a book on? And I've actually been thinking it's going to be the idea of motherhood, and just looking back at my own maternal like lineage and how I got here, and then I have a daughter, and so Maddie's already asked me questions about things like, oh, I don't want to have to go to the hospital until I'm having a baby, like my 6-year-old. So this idea of motherhood, and like, when do we start thinking about it, and what does it mean, and can you find mothering in like other people? So I think that's a book that's an item on my bucket list that I would love to get the courage to bring to fruition.
Oh, you're going to do it. And then you're going to come back to the podcast and talk about your book.
Yeah.
So that's on my bucket list.
Okay.
I like this. So if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'd say my advice to my younger self is to follow your intuition and never be afraid to bet on yourself, and that I'll be here when you get here.
I'll be here when you get here. That's really nice. Yeah. I really like that.
Yeah. I'm really excited for what's to come, to be honest. And I feel like, I'm turning 40 next year, and I think it wasn't until like a few months ago that I've actually started to feel like an adult, right? Like I said, like that healing of my inner child. I feel like now, I took a headshot the other day, and I was like, no, that woman looks powerful, right?
Your headshots were beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. But yeah, I was like, this is like, I feel like I'm coming to myself now. And I don't know if it's the magic number of 40 or the 4s or like whatever. Again, I believe in numerology and all these things, but to find meaning. But I feel like I'm just getting started.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. That's good. This is amazing.
We can do another one if you want.
We need another one. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining me today on She's Smart. You can find a new episode every Thursday. Bye.